A few years ago, one of you suggested to me that it might be an interesting exercise to make a list of biblical texts that are not included in the 3-year lectionary. If you're not familiar with the lectionary, it is nothing more than a table of texts to read in worship each Sunday over a 3-year period. Over those 3 years, we read a substantial portion of the entire Bible, but not all of it. Each year is named, imaginatively enough, Year A, Year B, and Year C. And each of the Synoptic Gospels is read most of the way through in one of these 3 years. Want to venture a guess when? You got it. We read Matthew in Year A, Mark in Year B, and Luke in Year C. For the record, we also read a large section of John, but it's interspersed throughout the 3-year lectionary cycle. Hello. I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas, and this is your daily devotional for Wednesday, February 4th, 2026. I've begun my project of finding out which biblical texts don't get read at all during the 3-year lectionary cycle, and as you might imagine, some of those texts are obvious. For example, many of the long sections of begats in the Old Testament are excluded. But there are other texts that are great texts, but just didn't make the cut. Now, there's no deep, dark conspiracy here, so if you are a conspiracy theorist, you'll look in vain for any sinister reason behind the choices of what to include and what to exclude. So this is all a very long way to introduce today's short reading from Mark 8. It turns out that only about a third of Mark 8 made it into the lectionary. Today's reading is of a brief encounter with some of the Pharisees. There are parallel stories in Matthew and Luke that do appear in the lectionary, so it's no surprise that this is one of the texts that didn't make the cut. In yesterday's reading, remember, from the beginning of Mark 8, Jesus fed 4,000 souls with 7 loaves of bread and a few fish. At the end of that story, he got into a boat with his disciples and crossed the Sea of Galilee once again. We pick up the story when he reaches the other shore. We read, "The Pharisees came and began to argue with him, asking him for a sign from heaven to test him. And he sighed deeply in his spirit and said, 'Why does this generation ask for a sign? Truly, I tell you, no sign will be given to this generation.' And he left them, and getting into the boat again, he went across to the other side." Just like in the parallel stories in Matthew and Luke, someone wants a sign, but Jesus refuses. Coming from the Pharisees, you can bet that the desire for a sign from Jesus is a thinly veiled attempt to catch him saying or doing something that they would find offensive or against the law of Moses. But it's also a sign of disrespect. To ask someone for a sign is to ask them to prove their legitimacy and their competence. It would be like asking a concert pianist to play a series of major scales to prove that they know how to play the piano. It's just downright insulting. But there is one little detail here that sets this scene apart from all of its parallels in the other Gospels. Mark says, he sighed deeply in his spirit. As far as I can tell, the word used in Greek here is used nowhere else in the New Testament. That alone makes it remarkable. But it is this little detail that tells us a lot. It gives us a glimpse into Jesus' inner thoughts. It's as if Jesus were just tired of arguing with people. He's just finished performing a magnificent sign by feeding the 4,000. The fact that he's now being asked for a sign on demand must have been wearying to him. I can understand that, and I'll bet you can too. These days it feels as though we're caught in a doom spiral of tit-for-tat arguing. It feels as though if one person remarks on how beautiful the sky is on a bright blue day, someone else will say that the sky is green, just because he can't let the other person be right about anything. It's about constant fault-finding. It just wears you out, and it is just plain exasperating. Sigh. Now may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.